My name is Ryan. I'm an ordinary guy, and nothing about my life at the time was unusual. I was 21 years old, living in a quiet part of the Midwest, and this happened on a day that started like any other. It was a normal Tuesday. I was home alone in my parents' house. They were both at work, and my younger sister was staying overnight at a friend's place. I had the day off from my part-time job, so I planned to relax, play some games, and maybe take a nap. The house was familiar to me. I had lived there most of my life. I knew every sound it made. I knew which floorboards creaked and which doors didn't shut properly. That's why what I noticed first didn't make sense. When I came downstairs that morning, the kitchen light was on. I clearly remembered turning it off before going to bed. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself I was mistaken. Maybe I left it on. Maybe my memory was off. It was early, and I hadn't had coffee yet. The house was quiet.
No TV.
No radio. No movement. Just silence. I checked the front door. It was locked. The back door was locked too. I told myself it was nothing and went about my day. I made breakfast. I sat on the couch. I scrolled on my phone. Everything felt normal again. But there was a strange feeling I couldn't shake. It felt like the house was waiting. Around noon, I went upstairs to grab a hoodie from my room. As I passed the guest bedroom, I noticed the door was slightly open. That door was always closed. Always. I stopped walking. I stared at the crack in the doorway. Nothing moved. No sound came from inside. I pushed the door closed and told myself to stop overthinking. Old houses shift. Doors move. Lights get forgotten. Still, my chest felt tight. Later that afternoon, I heard a sound from downstairs. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It sounded like someone carefully placing their foot on the floor. I froze at the top of the stairs, listening. The sound didn't repeat, but I knew what I heard. I called out, thinking maybe my parents came home early. No one answered. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The front door, which I had checked earlier, was unlocked. I stood there, completely still, listening to my own breathing. The house felt different now. Heavy.
Closed in.
I remember thinking one simple thing over and over again. I was home alone. At least I thought I was. The house was a two-story place in a quiet residential neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Just a standard American home built in the late 90s. White siding. Small front porch. A narrow driveway that led to a closed garage. We'd lived there for years without any serious problems. No break-ins.
No extrañe neighbors.
Nothing that would make you feel unsafe. It was early fall, one of those days where the air felt cool in the morning but warmed up by the afternoon. The sky stayed gray most of the day, not stormy, just dull. The kind of weather that made the house feel quieter than usual. Sound didn't travel far. Everything felt muted. I was home because I'd taken the day off work. I worked evenings at a local hardware store, and my schedule was uneven. That morning, my parents left around 7 like they always did. My dad went to his job at a warehouse. My mom worked at a medical office across town. My sister had left the night before with a backpack and a pillow, excited about staying over at her friend's house. By the time the front door shut behind them, I was alone. I didn't mind being home by myself. I actually liked it. The house felt calmer when it was empty. No TV noise from the living room. No conversations drifting through the halls. Just quiet. I made myself some food and planned to spend the day doing nothing important. The layout of the house was simple. Living room and kitchen downstairs. Bedrooms upstairs. A small hallway at the top of the stairs that connected everything. There was also a guest bedroom we almost never used. It stayed closed most of the time and felt colder than the rest of the house. I moved around the house throughout the day. I used the bathroom upstairs. I went into my parents' room to borrow a charger. I grabbed a jacket from my closet. Everything felt normal.
Familiar.
Safe. There were no sounds that stood out. No cars pulling into the driveway. No voices outside. The neighborhood was quiet because most people were at work or school. Even the houses across the street looked empty. The only other people involved were my family, and none of them were home. I sent my mom a quick text asking how her day was going. She replied with a thumbs up emoji and said she'd be late. My dad didn't answer because he usually couldn't use his phone at work. As the afternoon went on, the house stayed still. The lights were off. The curtains were half open, letting in dull daylight. Time passed slowly, and nothing seemed out of place.
At least that's what I thought at the time.
Looking back now, that calm is what bothers me the most. The house felt normal, in every way. There was nothing obvious to warn me. Nothing that suggested something was already wrong. I truly believed I was alone in that house. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the house felt. Not the normal quiet I was used to, but a heavier kind. The kind where every small sound stands out. I was sitting on the couch downstairs, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a noise from above me. It was faint, just a soft creak. The kind you could easily ignore if you wanted to. At first, I did. Old houses make noise all the time, especially when the temperature changes. A few minutes passed, and I heard it again. This time, it came from a hallway upstairs. I lowered my phone and listened. Nothing followed.
No footsteps. No voices.
Just silence. I told myself it was probably the house settling or the air vents. Still, I felt myself paying closer attention to everything around me. When I stood up to get a drink of water, I noticed the hallway light upstairs was on. I was sure I hadn't turned it on. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the glow spilling down the wall. I waited, half expecting someone to step into view. No one did. I walked up slowly and turned the light off. As soon as I did, the house felt darker than before. The hallways seemed longer. The doors on either side looked the same as always, but something about them made me uncomfortable. I didn't know why. Back downstairs, I tried to focus on the TV. That's when I heard a soft thud. It came from the kitchen, like something being set down gently on the counter. My stomach tightened. I muted the TV and listened. Again, nothing. I checked the kitchen. Everything looked normal. No drawers open. No cabinets out of place. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to my own breathing. As I turned to leave, I felt it. That feeling you get when someone is behind you. I didn't turn around right away. I stayed still, listening for movement. There was none, but the feeling didn't go away. It followed me back into the living room. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. They came from upstairs and stopped at the top of the stairs. I held my breath and waited. The footsteps didn't continue, but I could sense someone standing there, just out of sight. My heart was beating faster now, but I stayed calm. I didn't want to panic over nothing. I called out, asking if anyone was home. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet house. No one answered. The footsteps didn't come back, but I could no longer relax. Every small sound made me tense. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint sound of air moving through the vents. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it, but the house no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. After the footsteps stopped, I stayed seated on the couch, barely moving.
I didn't want to
make noise. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. The house felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe a neighbor had come by. Maybe my parents came home and left again. None of those thoughts made sense, but they were easier than the truth I was starting to accept. I picked up my phone and checked the time. Just after 3 p.m. Still hours before anyone else would be home. That's when I heard it again. Movement. This time it wasn't upstairs. It came from the hallway behind me. I turned slowly and saw the guest bedroom door was open. I was certain I had closed it earlier. The room was dark. No light coming from inside. Just a black space where the doorway should have been. I stood up and backed away. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing steady. I didn't want whoever was there to hear me panic. As I stepped closer to the front door, the sound of breathing filled the hallway. Not loud, not rushed. Slow and controlled. Like someone was standing just out of sight, listening. I realized then that I was being watched. The floor creaked softly as weight shifted somewhere behind the wall. I heard a footstep. Then another. Whoever it was They were moving closer.
Carefully.
Deliberately. I whispered, asking if someone was there. My voice sounded weak, even to me. No answer. The front door was only a few feet away now. I reached for the handle and froze. The lock was turned. I hadn't unlocked it. I was sure of that. A chill ran through me. Someone had touched the door. Behind me, the breathing stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. It felt like a warning, like whoever was in the house knew I was about to leave. I heard a hand brush against the wall in the hallway. The sound was faint but real. The person was close enough that I could hear fabric move as they shifted. I felt trapped. The stairs were behind me. The hallway was blocked. The only exit was the front door, and I didn't know if I could get it open in time. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see who it was yet. I was afraid that once I did, it would be too late. I stood there, holding my breath, listening as the footsteps moved closer, one slow step at a time, closing the distance between us. Whatever was in my house was no longer hiding.
It was coming for me.
I grabbed the front door handle and pulled hard. It didn't open. For a split second, I thought the lock was jammed. Then I realized it had been locked from the inside. My hands were shaking now, and I didn't bother trying to hide it anymore. Behind me, I heard a step. Close. Too close. I turned around. A man stood at the end of the hallway. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and his face was partly hidden by the shadows. He didn't rush toward me. He just stood there, watching. That made it worse. He looked calm, like he had been expecting this moment. I asked him what he wanted. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. He didn't answer. He took one step forward. That's when I moved. I ran toward the kitchen, my shoes slipping on the floor. I could hear him behind me now.
Fast footsteps.
Heavy breathing. The sound of someone chasing, without shouting. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a chair, and shoved it into the kitchen doorway as I passed through. I didn't wait to see if it slowed him down. I kept running. The back door was locked too. Panic hit me hard. My chest felt tight, and my hands were numb. I fumbled with the lock, finally yanking the door open just as something slammed into it from the other side. I stumbled onto the back porch and fell. I didn't feel the pain. I got up and ran across the yard, straight into the neighbor's fence. I climbed it without thinking, tearing my jeans and scraping my hands. I didn't stop until I reached the street. I turned back once and saw him standing at the edge of the yard, just watching me again. He didn't chase me further.
He didn't yell.
He simply stood there, as if he knew I couldn't do anything else. I ran to the nearest house and pounded on the door until someone answered. I could barely speak. I told them there was a man in my house. They called the police. While we waited, I kept looking down the street, afraid he would appear again. My entire body was shaking now. The fear didn't fade. It stayed sharp and real. I had escaped, but only because he let me. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later, but it felt much longer. 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the house, lights flashing but sirens off. They told me to stay with my neighbor while they cleared the place. I watched from across the street as they went inside. Guns drawn. Slow. Careful. Every window was checked. Every door. Upstairs. Basement.
Garage.
After a while, one of the officers came back out and asked me to walk them through what happened. My voice was steadier than I expected as I explained everything. The footsteps. The locked doors. The man in the hallway. They believed me. That alone scared me. Inside the house, nothing looked disturbed at first. No broken furniture. No open drawers. No signs of a struggle. If I hadn't been there, it would have looked completely normal. Then one officer called us upstairs. In the guest bedroom, the closet door was slightly open. Inside, they found shoes that didn't belong to anyone in my family. A backpack. Bottled water. Protein bars. A phone charger plugged into the wall. The officer told me to sit down. They checked the attic next. That's where things got worse. There was a thin mattress pushed into the corner. A blanket. A flashlight. Empty food wrappers. Someone had been sleeping up there. For a long time. The police said there were no signs of forced entry. No broken locks.
No damit windows.
Whoever he was, he had access. That's when my mom arrived. She looked confused, scared, and guilty all at once. She told the officers something she hadn't mentioned before. Months earlier, she had let a man stay temporarily. A coworker's cousin. He said he needed a place for a few nights while he looked for work. He seemed polite.
Quiet.
He left after a week. Or so she thought. The police believe he never left. He had been hiding in the attic and guest room, moving only when the house was empty. Eating our food. Watching our routines. Learning our schedules. That day was different because I wasn't supposed to be home. I had surprised him. One officer told me something I still think about. He said the man didn't panic because he wasn't improvising. He already knew the house. He already knew where I would run. They found fingerprints on the inside of my bedroom door, on the bathroom light switch, on the back door lock. He had been closer to me before, much closer than I ever realized. They never caught him. Sometimes I think about how calm he was when I saw him, like I was the one out of place. I didn't stay in that house much longer. For a few weeks, my parents and I tried to go back to normal, but nothing ever felt the same. The locks were changed. Motion lights were installed. We checked the attic every night before bed. Still, the feeling never left. I couldn't sleep in my room anymore. Every small sound made me sit up. The house made the same noises it always had, but now each one felt intentional. Like a signal. Like someone testing whether I was paying attention. The police followed up a few times. They told us there were no leads. No name. No record. The man never used the phone charger they found. No fingerprints matched anything in the system. It was like he didn't exist. That was supposed to make me feel better. It didn't. I moved out a month later and stayed with a friend across town. Even there, I kept my door locked. I slept lightly. I listened for footsteps that weren't there. Sometimes, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt the same pressure I felt that afternoon. The sense of being observed. Of sharing space with someone unseen. A few weeks after I moved, my mom called me. She sounded hesitant. She asked if I had ever noticed anything missing from my room. I told her no. She paused and then said she found something in the back of my closet while cleaning. A small flashlight. The same model the police found in the attic. None of us could explain how it got there. The house was sold not long after. The new owners never reported anything strange.
No noises.
No break-ins. No signs of anyone hiding. That should have been the end of it. But sometimes, when I visit my parents' new place, I catch myself counting doors, listening for breathing, watching dark hallways longer than I need to. I still don't know where that man went. I don't know if he was caught somewhere else. I don't know if he ever stopped hiding. What I do know is this. He learned how to live unseen once. And people like that don't always disappear. I never truly went back to normal after that day. Even now, years later, the feeling still follows me. For the first few weeks after the incident, my parents tried to treat everything like a bad memory we could move past. They changed every lock in the house. They installed motion sensors and cameras. They even added a security system that beeped every time a door opened. On the surface, the house became safer than it had ever been. But safety didn't matter anymore. At night, I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening. Every creak felt deliberate. Every shift in the walls sounded like footsteps being tested carefully. I stopped using headphones. I stopped sleeping deeply. I learned the sound of my parents breathing through their bedroom door, so I could tell if something else was moving. The attic hatch stayed locked, but I still checked it every night before bed. Sometimes twice. The police stopped calling after a while. They said there was nothing else they could do. No new reports matched his description. No break-ins nearby.
No arrests.
The case slowly went cold, like it had never mattered in the first place. That bothered me more than anything. I moved out sooner than planned. I didn't tell many people why. Saying it out loud made it feel real again, and I didn't want to see disbelief on their faces. I stayed with a friend in an apartment complex across town. New place. New walls.
New sounds. But the habits followed me.
I memorized exits. I slept with my phone in my hand. I kept a chair pressed against my bedroom door every night. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I wondered if he ever went back to our house after I left. If he stood in my old room, touching the walls again. If he noticed the cameras. If he smiled knowing he had already won by leaving without being caught. About a month after I moved out, my mom called me late at night. Her voice sounded strained, like she was trying not to panic. She asked me again if I was sure nothing had ever gone missing from my room.
Clothes.
Chargers. Anything small. I told her I was sure. That's when she told me about the flashlight. She found it tucked behind a box in the back of my closet. Not on the floor. Not dropped. Placed there. The same model police had photographed in the attic. Same scratches on the side. Same weak button that flickered when you pressed it. None of us could explain it. The closet had been emptied before I moved out.
We were certain of that.
Which meant it had been placed there afterward. The police searched the house one last time. Nothing else was found.
No fingerprints.
No signs of entry. The cameras showed nothing unusual. Doors locked. Windows closed. Officially, the explanation was simple. We missed it before. Unofficially, none of us believed that. My parents sold the house within 6 months. They didn't tell the buyers what happened. I don't blame them. The house was just a house to anyone else.
Clean. Quiet.
Normal. The new owners never reported anything strange.
No noises.
No missing food. No lights turning on by themselves. Nothing. That should have made me feel relieved. Instead, it made me uneasy. Because I knew how careful he was. How patient. How invisible. Sometimes when I'm alone now, I still feel it. That same pressure in my chest. That sense that space isn't as empty as it looks. I find myself watching reflections in windows. Listening for breathing that doesn't match my own. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know why he stayed hidden instead of leaving. I don't know how many other houses he might have lived in without being noticed. The worst part is knowing how close he was without me ever realizing it. How easily normal life continued while he watched from the dark. And every now and then, when I lock my door at night, a thought crosses my mind that I can't get rid of. If he learned how to hide once, what's stopping him from doing it again? Even now, I still catch myself doing things I never used to do. I check vents when I enter a room. I look up at ceiling corners without thinking. If a door is open that I don't remember opening, I close it slowly and stand there for a moment, listening. I don't tell people about this anymore. When I did, they would say I was lucky. That I got out. That it was over. I would nod and let them believe that, because explaining the rest was too hard. What they don't understand is that nothing actually ended. No arrest was made. No name was ever attached to him. There was no explanation for where he went or how long he had been watching us live our normal lives. The police never called again. Sometimes I wonder if he listens the same way I do now. If he still memorizes routines. If he still waits for houses to be empty, or thinks they are. I've learned that being alone doesn't always mean being by yourself. And that's the part one can't escape. Because every time I lock my door at night, a small part of me still asks the same question I asked that day in my parents' house. How do you know when you're truly alone?